improving memory handout, which I'll talk about in a second. And that's kind of, especially with taking exams like the CPA exam, the CMA exam, CIA exam, whatever exam it is. How do you memorize a lot of things in a very short period of time? And then we'll start our classical sampling. We're not going to finish it, and we'll start chapter 3, and we're not going to finish that either. But this one we should be able to turn into the improving memory handout. So let's pull it up. Okay. Now, just in general, I really don't have too much interest in how the mind works. I probably should, but the only reason why I was interested in this, I used to teach a CPA review class at a previous university I was at, and the question is, how do you get people to retain a huge amount of information in a very short period of time? And it has to be a very short period of time. When you start getting out past a few weeks, you lose it. So, a lot of people tell me, I'm going to start studying the CPA exam a year ahead of time, and then you're wasting your time. You're not going to remember it. But you shoot for like a 6 to 8 week period where you memorize everything. And the question is, how do you keep that in your mind? This huge amount of information, how do you keep that in your memory, long enough to do this exam? And people say, well, nowadays with AI, first of all, you can't use that at the CPA exam. But second of all, you'd never finish the exam if you had to keep looking stuff up like that. So even if you could use it, but you can't, it wouldn't be any help. So anyway, the question is, how do you do that? How do you do it? And whether you're sitting for the CMA exam or the CIA exam or the CPA, CFE, Certified Fraud Exam, or any of those, you got to get a lot of information and you got to remember it. So this and how to improve memory, and those of you that had me before see this, but the question is not really how to trick the mind, but just to know how it works. So anyway, that's what this is all about. Okay, it's very important for the brain to forget. 99.9% of the stuff you forget, and most of the stuff you forget, it doesn't even ever go in your brain in the first place. Walk outside and 5 cars drive by. Each of those cars has a color. Your brain probably said right away, forget about it. You don't need to know that. And you didn't even know that you were forgetting it. Okay. So you have to remember it. So how do we get things into long-term memory? So this is really what we're talking about.
Sorry, Professor, which handout is this?
This is the improving memory one. Do you guys have that? Hopefully you do. Did I not send it?
I got it. Thank you.
Okay. I want to check just to make sure I put it in the Blackboard. I think I did. Okay, I did. No, this is good. This will. Yeah, if you ever don't get it in or sometimes if your email blocks the this show. Or e-show. Okay. They do include those in assignments and submittals. Okay, so how do you get that in long term? Now, long term is kind of a misnomer, and it's actually we're talking about a few seconds. We're not talking about 3 years from now. We're talking about a few seconds to keep it in there. Okay. A synapse is a structure that permits a neuron or nerve cell to pass on electrical. You can read all about that. It's the smallest amount of information your brain will retain about a topic. Now, this is the important one: synaptic plasticity, and that is the idea that it can strengthen or weaken. Okay, so short-term memory is linked to the function changes in existing synapses. This is the important one. Long-term memory is a change in the number of synaptic connections. I won a Nobel Peace Prize for that, by the way, so I would assume he knows what he's talking about. So it's not the quality, it's the quantity that makes it go into long-term memory. You know, so when you're thinking about how do I get things in there for the long term, it isn't that you just sit there and concentrate as hard as you possibly can. Some more synapses you build up. And generally you do that fairly quickly. As you're learning something, you should do it fairly quickly, reinforce it. Now, here is maybe, it's kind of buried in here, but this is equally important. It doesn't matter how the synapses are created. So however you create the synapses is, it doesn't matter. It's just that it's simply a quantity. You're looking for the number. So the more you have, the more you're going to remember it. And they could be anything. Okay. So how to improve memory? First of all, taking notes by hand. Let's make that green. The writing vastly increases the usage of motor cortexes and blah blah blah. Okay. The idea is, if you take notes by hand, you say, well, okay, well, I can just type on the keyboard, right? Here's an S, I type an S. And that does take a synapse. It takes a little bit of information to do it. To actually form an S, it takes a huge amount of brain power. Believe it or not. I mean, that's, you know, think about a language, how long it took, you know, your little kid, if you have little kids learning how to speak, takes years, and then learning how to make the words and using the motor skills to write down the letter and do it. It takes a huge amount of brain power. That's why writing stuff down, well, it's much more likely to have you remember it, because now it's a simple act and you probably don't think about it too much, but it's a huge amount of synapses. And again, we're just looking for the quantity. We want to get a higher quantity of synapses. We don't care how it can spell. So if it's writing, even though that's maybe not the highest level skill that we will be using, it'll make more synapses, a lot more synapses than simply say typing. Okay. Reading notes out loud and discussing them with classmates. Reading notes out loud. Sometimes you say to someone, well, reread your notes. That doesn't do anything. And you say, why? Because that's usually short-term memory, you know, repeating it. Somewhere in there. No, my memory's gone. No, but if you read them out loud, speaking is very difficult. And, you know, it takes years for the kids to learn how to speak. You know, it takes them a really long time, even though they got big brains and everything, just like the rest of us. It takes them a very long time to learn how to use those and control your. So speaking, even if it's to yourself, if it's speaking just to yourself, it's reinforcing and connecting all those synapses, because it's really difficult to do. You don't think about it. You do it all day long. You talk to your mom and all that kind of stuff. But it actually really strengthens those synapses because it builds a bunch of them. And again, we're just looking for quantity. You're not looking for, you know, anything else. So rereading your notes out loud actually good. And discussing with somebody else is actually even more, because now you're discussing, you're talking to them, you're responding to what they're saying, and you know, you're building even more synapses. So reading your notes out loud just by yourself or discussing with classmates, that does a huge amount to build up those synapses. Repetition. Repetition it does help, but usually that is not what you're doing as far as, that's when you're strengthening them. You're not necessarily getting a larger quantity of them. There is something, and by the way, if you team up the repetition with one of the other ones we're talking, right? So I mean, if you, for instance, reading your notes out loud once, if you do it twice, it'll strengthen those a little bit better, and it is developing those synapses and whatever. So, and rewriting the notes, same thing, building up those synapses, either the strength of them, possibly even new ones, depending if you add something to it or, you know, put in a note or whatever, that becomes a new a replacement of the other ones, which also helps to increase your memory. There was another, there was a, I think maybe I'll say that he also had the idea that every time you reread something, when you strengthen it, it actually takes out the old one, puts in the new. That's good in the short term. In the long term, it can be bad because sometimes people's memory changes, you know, and you'll see them say, you know, years later, something completely opposite of what he said. That's because every time they remember it, it goes in as a brand new synapse, and that becomes the fact, and whatever it is. So it can change over time. The short amount of time they were talking about for the CPA exam, you won't have to worry. Okay, using memory triggers. Oops. Any questions on anything? Okay, so some of these are because it's more likely to be remembered if you can use any of the following. Guided readings, and again, reading those out loud is actually a good one. And finding, you know, hunting and finding words and things like that develops. So flashcards, same thing. This one is a very important one. It's so important, I'm going to give it a different color. Color-coded writing, highlighters, things like that. Those actually increase the number of synapses considerably. And this is another strange thing. This is the strange thing about, specifically about the human brain, the mammals. But color-coded writing is a very strong, colors are a very strong cortex, and a huge amount of your brain is spent knowing colors. Humans are one of the very few mammals can actually see colors. And it's a very rare thing in mammals. There are some, but most of them can't. And there's no reason for a lot of them to. If I'm a bunny rabbit and a coyote's chasing after me, I don't care what color it is, you know, I'm just gonna run away. And so humans are one of the very few animals that actually see colors. It takes a huge amount of brain power to do it. Now you don't know that, you're not conscious of it, you know, you don't say, oh gee, I'm looking at this orange color. Well, this is, you know, this orange one is much more difficult to see than, you know, this black or white grayscale. You don't think that there's any difference in your brain. This one is actually much more difficult for your brain to figure out. There's a huge you know, the palette is huge on it, so your brain figuring out that color. So color coordinating things, highlighting things, writing things in different color pens, markers, and all that kind of stuff. Those are very good ways of remembering it because, again, you're creating, even though you're writing the same thing, your brain is making more synapses as you go through that. So color-coded writing, either you know, have colored pens, highlighters, all that kind of stuff. Those all increase the number of synapses, and we're just looking for the number of synapses to increase. Okay, mnemonic devices, singing a song, that kind of stuff. Those are ways you can create more synapses, and they can be strengthened, obviously, the more times you do it. Writing it down from memory, this is a good way, again, especially writing it down by hand, you know, it increases those. And the one outlier here that's a little strange that really isn't explained anywhere I've seen anyways, is studying before you go to sleep. And usually within the last half hour before you go to sleep, if you study something right before you go to sleep, for some odd reason, it stays in your memory longer. And I don't know if they've ever really figured out why that is. But anyway, so be right before you go to sleep if you, whatever you study. Now, if you're cramming, let's say you're, the night before, you probably have a hard time sleeping anyways, thinking about going into the next day and doing the exam. If you can study something, take a little nap, study something, take a little nap, study something, take a little nap. That is a very good way to put things in, especially near the end, when you're getting ready to go in. But, for whatever odd reason, studying right before sleep. Okay, now our little quiz. Number 7. Which of the following will usually work best to increase luck? My screen kind of, my lettering kind of looks gray for some reason. Oops. Looks like I misspelled something. Okay. Which of these will increase the long-term memory?
A.
A will help. Which one is the best?
C.
Yep. Yeah, the number of synapses. We're looking, and it doesn't matter what, it could be singing a song, it could be saying it out loud to yourself, things you might think are kind of not helpful. Those are very helpful because we just want to get the number up. The more we have, the better. All right. Which of the following will usually increase the number of synapses?
B.
Yep. Reading it aloud. And again, we're just looking to increase the number of those synapses. It doesn't matter that, speaking is not necessarily about the auditing rules for independence or something, but it does help you to remember it. Which of the following is usually the best for retaining a topic in long-term memory?
C.
Yeah. Yeah, listening to lectures really doesn't do very much. Typing the notes is probably the second best, but reading and listening is generally, those are very passive activities and they don't usually develop too many synapses. But typing is probably the second best here, but handwriting is the best. Discussion with classmates about a topic can create multiple new synapses.
Choose.
Yep. Using highlighter and text colors can create multiple new synapses.
True.
Only synapses directly related to topic can create long-term memory. What do you think? I remember something by singing Three Blind Mice, but I sing it to the whatever notes I'm taking. Think about auditor independence. Is Three Blind Mice related to auditor independence? False. They do not have to be directly related. They can be anything. You want to dance around the room while you do it, that's fine too. That'll create synapses too. So whatever, whatever it takes to create more synapses, and again, it's simply a number. It's not a quality, and I'll really look at this one topic and it's not like that. The other creative, the synapses somehow, the number. That's it. Any questions on them? Well, anyway, this one we can go ahead and you can turn that one in. Probably the only one we're gonna finish this week. It is the only one we're gonna finish. The other ones are really. Okay, let me see here. Classical sample. This is the same one we had last week. I sent out, so you don't have to. Like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through a sampling exercise, and then next week we'll probably get into how what they actually ask for on the CPA exam. But it's good to know exactly how it's done in real life. And let me first start this by doing something completely different. Let's see. Hold on a second. There's something in the way. Is there? All right. It doesn't matter. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is here's the idea behind sampling: is you take a few items, a few, whatever it is in your sample. And so this will be our sample. And what you do is you take a few items in your sample and you project that over the entire population. So this sample gets projected over the entire population. And they do this, sometimes you do it for to be efficient, sometimes you do it because there's no other way to do it. If you develop let's say you develop a new cold medicine. Okay, do you take the entire 8 billion people on the planet and give them the cold medicine? No, it's impossible to do. So you take a sample, whatever, 500 people, you give them the cold medicine and see how it works on them, and then you try to make a guess as far as, or estimate, I should say, as far as how much it will work on the entire population as a whole. So, and this is whether you're doing medicine or anything else. And in our case, we're going to be doing something like, I forget what it was. Accounts receivable. So these are accounts receivable. So we're going to take a sample of our accounts receivable and we're going to project it over the entire population of our accounts receivable. And even if we could do the entire population, a lot of times we can get very close to 99% by a fairly small sample rather than doing the entire population. So this is why we're doing it. We're doing it for efficiency, and that we can actually get very accurate information usually from taking a sample. And again, and one of the things you got to remember too is that we're also using it's to everyone's benefit if we do things efficiently. Wrong thing. Like that's not efficient, but it was stupid. Now I want to share my screen. Okay, so go back to this thing. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to pick a sample, a random sample. We like it to be random because if it's random, it's unbiased. But we random samples in your statistics. I'm sure you guys don't create your statistical tools. So we're going to take a random sample. Now we're gonna take 5 items for testing, and we're gonna find the average book value, yada, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So we're gonna on the random number table, we're gonna take 5 items. Oop, what's in there? Okay. So down here, we have a random number table. Truthfully, random number tables are really what they would call random digits. And that each digit here is random between 1 and 10, or 0 and 9. So these are the random numbers, and you can use them in any combination you want. Yeah, as far as we're going over. Now, when we look at our sample here, let's make those. How many digits do we need to pick a sample? Well, 30 has 2 digits, and so we need at least 2 digits. So that's why they're saying we're going to pick the first 2 columns, do the first 2 digits, the random number table. And we're going to come down here, and now our limit is 30. Okay, so let's take the first 2 digits. And I'm going to make that green. The first 2 digits, 03. Can we use that? Is there a 3 in our sample? An item number 3. Yes. Yes, there is. Here's our number. So we're gonna pick the first one we're gonna pick is number 3. The first 2 digits in our random number table are 03. So, okay, is there item number 46? Anyone? Is there an item 46? No, it goes up to 30. We can't use 46. We can't use 51. What's the next one we could use in a random number table?
11.
Yep. So we can get an 11. So let's go up here and highlight 11. We're going to take that one. And next we have
14.
Yeah. Grab that one. $18. There is no 91. There is a 28. So we have picked a random sample based on a random number table. Now, here's something that is important to auditing, maybe more than some other sampling applications. And that is, hey, that's not me. The eyebrows look different. That's me. So here's the weird thing about auditing. Dracula. So here's the thing about auditing that is different, and that is that everything you do in auditing must be repeatable by somebody else and get the same results. So when you come to picking a random sample, you can't just randomly pick a sample. You have to show how you randomly pick the sample. So first 2 digits of the column. The next, so when someone reviews your work, and they will, everything you do in auditing gets reviewed at least minimum once, but probably 3 or 4 times. Some people look at them. they must be able to go in, pick the same random sample you did, do the testing and come up with the same results. The judgment may not be the same, but the results should be. So let's say, just, you know, you take a sample and out of whatever, out of 100 items, 3 of them are bad. Okay, everyone should come up with that same result, that 3 of them are bad. Now, someone may say, oh, 3 of them bad is a bad thing. Some say, 3 are bad, that's not a big deal. That's a judgment call. But everyone should come up with the same result, that 3 of these are not done correctly, or whatever it is. So anyway, you have to document how you pick the sample, and it has to be in your work paper so that someone else coming in will say, okay, okay, the first 2 columns going down, okay, and this is the sample you picked. Okay, I get it. This is, we'll pick the same items, the same random items, and we should get the same results. Okay. All right, so we're gonna start putting these items in here. I think I can just copy it. I think if you're doing this in a handout, I think you should be able to copy. I'm positive on that. Let me see. Hey. And I'm just gonna paste all these in and then we'll go over each one of them. 3. $18. And again, from our table here, anyone who goes looking for those should be able to find the same ones we picked and pick those for you. And as you go down here, you'll notice that, a lot of them are gonna be the same in real life. You've come across it. This one's different, this one's different. Same, okay. So, here's what we need to do. I should have done this differently. Might look at this. I'm gonna move my totals up here. Hey, why is that like that? There we go. Okay. I apologize for it. Look, it's the other half now. Okay, so what we're gonna do is add up the total book amount. So this is what the client is saying. So this is the client's numbers. And the audit amount, these are the audit numbers. So these are the ones that we looked at these accounts receivable. We looked at these accounts receivable. These are the numbers the auditors came up with. So in our audit, we came up with these. The client gave us these. So we're gonna add those in. I hope that I can do this in Excel. Is that a reasonable number? I think that's it. 33,795. Put that in. And we're gonna do the same thing for the audit. So this is what we came up with. $32,395. Yeah, I think that's right. 32,390. Okay. By the way, if you guys come over, if you guys, you guys know it's a different one, so 32. Is that fast? 32,395. Okay, so these are the totals. We need to find the averages. So what do we do? Why is doing that? Is it showing up as like a half there and half not on your screen? Nine. Okay. So if we want to find the average for the book, what would we do? Oh, you guys are toying with me.
Add all the amounts together and then divide them by 5.
So we're gonna divide each of these by 5. And I'm not sure why it's showing half of my row there, but okay, so like the mystery calculator. I guess I should do it in the other one. I should do it here, okay? Be less likely for me to goof up. Okay. So 67. $67,759. That's right. 7,5. That's a transposition error, but I just did. 67,759. And this one is 64,7. Okay, I'm gonna stop right there and make sure. Do anyone get a different numbers for those? If you did, let me know, because I'll definitely go over them again and see if they did it right. I mean, I don't want to waste time if they are okay, but same time. Okay, so 5 by 5, so this is what we would have for our averages for each of these. Okay, so the average book value. So this is what the client gave us. Our client, whoever it is. Six, 7. Okay, and the audit value is for those 6,479. Question on that? Okay, so we'll come down here and I'm just copying these down to the next page. Okay. So we have our averages for the book average and we have the audit average. And this is what the client gave us, whoever we're auditing. So if this is IBM, sure they have more accounts receivable than that, but this IBM, our client was IBM and we're auditing them, this would be there, what they gave us. And this would be what we came. 64.79. Okay, so they gave us this, we went and looked at them and we came up with this. Which one of these two numbers is more persuasive? Which one of these numbers are we gonna really be focusing on as being the correct ones? The book average or the audit average? Which one's gonna carry more weight? So this is what someone gave us. Not somebody, our client. Our client gave us this. The auditors went out and looked at it. So this is, now let's put that in. This is the client. So the client, they're getting the audit. And this is, these are the auditors came up with this one, which is us. Which one of these is more persuasive? Oh, come on, make a guess.
The audit average.
Yep. Yeah, the audit average, this is the one that is gonna carry the more weight. We know this one, and whenever you have, it's always more persuasive, what the auditor's work is always more persuasive than other people's. If you think about it, like hearsay, someone else tells you something versus you go look at it yourself. Which is gonna carry more weight? Well, the stuff you went and looked at yourself, you're like, okay, and you know, I looked at it myself, and that's more persuasive than someone simply telling it to you. Sometimes people will tell you things, they could be they're misleading, it could be they think that they're telling you the right thing, it could be any number of things, you know, they could be mistaken, it could be whatever, not necessarily people being evil, but sometimes people will think it, and you say, well, no, it's like this, and they'll say, oh, is it? Oh, I didn't know that, you know. Not that they're trying to be misleading, but a lot of times they'll give you things that they think are correct. You know, they're not trying to be deceiving, you know. And the same thing with these accounts receivable. They comes out of their system, they probably say, okay, yeah, we think this is correct, and we go look at it and go, okay, well, this it's off some. So what do you do? Okay, now comes the part of this. From the Dracula thing they've done. So you don't need to write this down. So how do we project it over the entire population? And that's where we're at right now. We have our sample, but now we got to do this. We got to project it over the entire population. And there's three ways that we do it. And you don't have to write this down, it's in the handout, but we're going to do this by mean per unit. Ratio estimation. Difference estimation. And again, you don't write this down, it's in your handout. So we are going to project this over. See, look, I'm doing it in colors so we remember it. So this is what we're going to do to project it over the entire population. We got our sample. Look at these colors. Just, wow, you're gonna remember that forever. So here's our sample. We got to project it over the entire population. So, okay, so we have to figure out if that entire population. Now, in this case, the entire population is the 200,000 for accounts receivable. So we want to know if that 200,000 of accounts receivable. We want to know, is that a good number? Or is it a reasonable number? And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to take our sample, project it over, and see what it comes up with for that. Okay. Sure. Okay, so first one we're gonna do is mean per unit. And we take the audit average because this is the more reliable of those. The more persuasive number. I think I'm in the wrong spot here. Hold on. Come down here. Now, here's what we're saying. We got here for this average of 64,979. We're saying that every item in this entire sample, all 30 items, should be what we came up with. So the items in the entire population were 30. We had 30 accounts receivable. And this will be our projected value. Times. So this is what we think that our $194,370. I'm gonna check that. So this is our projected value. I'll put this in a second. Why do I have those on there twice? Not sure. Oh, I know. So we have our total book value is 200,000. That's what they tell us it's worth. When we looked at it, we came up with, and again, maybe you should check my math on these. Occasionally I have students say, how do you get this number? Did it wrong. So make sure you check it. So what is the projected misstatement? That's a question I don't know the answer to. Anyone?
5630.
You said 5630?
Yes.
Okay, so this is our projected mistake for it. Make that blue too, I guess. Okay, so here's our projected value. I'm gonna copy and paste that up here. Oops. Here is our projected mistake. Okay, now, are we saying that their books are overstated or understated? This is what we think it is. This is our best estimate as far as what, we did our,
Over.
yes, they're overstated by 5,000. Now, anyone doing this, the sample should come up with those same things. Now, the question is the 5,630, is that a material misstatement? That's a judgment call. And generally speaking, the CPA exam does not ask for judgment calls. They won't say if the projected misstatement is this, is that material or not. They don't get into that. But that would be something that could be different between auditors. One auditor might say 5,600 is fine. Someone else may say, no, it's unacceptably high. Okay, let's go to ratio estimation. Ratio estimation says that everything is off by a ratio. And the ratio is audit average compared to the book average. These are different. If they're the same, the ratio is 1-to-1 and it won't make any difference. But if there's a ratio that they're off by. So we're not saying that everything is It has to be the same value, but we're saying that the ratio is gonna be the same throughout the items. We take the audit average and we divide it by the book average. And we multiply that by the total book value. So this is the 200,000. So this ratio is 64.79 divided by 57, whatever that comes out to be. I'm gonna round off the nearest dollar. 191,715. $82, $84. So a misstatement. A projected misstatement is 8,000. $285. And again, that is, if you use this method, that is exactly what we should have for projected value. Everybody should get it, even if you didn't, anyone who looks at the work paper should be able to come up with those same numbers. If the 8,000 is material, that's a judgment call. Overstated or understated?
Overstated.
And the last one, this one's the kind of the wackiest one, probably the one that is.
Sorry, Professor, can you go back up really quick so I can just take a picture of that because I didn't get everything.
Yeah, and by the way, I know you guys can cut and paste this. I would encourage you to write these in. The reason being is that even typing it in, but we'll write it by hand at the best. But even typing it in is better than cutting and paste. You get there's no synapses to that. But if you're typing it in, I would encourage you to do that. Oh, I didn't put the, hold on, I put it wrong, well, I didn't put it up complete here, so 715. And again, this comes from our, so this is what we would project it out to be. All right, so the one that is the whack, this one. Why I have it. I think I'm supposed to put it on here. We subtract these. I'm gonna copy this down. After I tell you guys not to do that. Oh, I'm gonna copy it. Sorry. All right, so this is let's see here. The audit amount minus audit average minus the book average. So here's what we're gonna say, everything is off by, you know, it's a difference, we subtracted. Everything is off by the same amount, every item in that sample will be off by the same amount. And this one's a little bit different than the other ones because you start with the projected misstatement before you get this projected value. I'll show it in a second. What? Okay, I think it's negative 280. So we're saying that everything on there is overstated by $280, right? We're saying the average should be this. They give an average of this. We're saying everything in the sample is overstated by 280. There are 30 items in the sample. So this will be our projected misstatement, and this is going to be an overstatement. $8,400. All right, now, so the overstatement here is, well, let's put it here. Okay, so coming down here, we have our rejection misstatement is 8,400, and that's an overstatement. We're saying everything is too high by 8,400. The projected, or excuse me, the book value that they gave us, what the client gave us, was 2,000. So what would be the projected value? You were saying that 200,000 is overstated by 8,400. So they gave us this 200,000. We said, no, you're overstating each one of these by 280. So the total of those overstatements are 8,400. So what would the projected value for this be? What would we think that the actual value of the accounts receivable is based on this method? Anyone? $200,000 is overstated. So what should the projected value be for this? What do we think this is really valued?
191,006.
Yep. One. I'm in the wrong spot. Hold on. Yeah, so this is going to be what our projected. So we think it shouldn't be 200,000. We think it should be 1 million. Okay, so let's put these in. Oh, we already did that. So this one was go in. Okay. Any question on that? All right, I'm going to look at something quick. Okay, so these are kind of what we came up with for our 3 methods. V per unit said, okay, it's not 200,000, it's 194,370. Ratio estimation, 191,715, and difference estimation is 91,600. So we projected it using each of these different methods and came up with a little bit different numbers. These are sort of consistent, but these two especially, but they do come up with different numbers for this. So let's go back to. So all three have methods that use the same sample. Did they all use the same sample? Yes.
True.
Yep. Exactly right. True. They all use the same average and average for the book and for the all three classical sampling methods will estimate the same projected value for the population. Are they all the same?
False.
False. So it depends on what method you use. And later on, we'll talk about when you use which ones. The CPA exam will tell you which one to use. And I can't think I've ever seen them ask which one should you use. Okay, let's stop here. And we will take a break. And I'm going to pull up the next thing we're going to cover. I think we're going to take a break. I'm going to, let's see, it's chapter 3. Let's use, let's say be back at, what time is it? 7:05, so say 7:15. And stick around for this one. This one is a tricky one, and this is probably the hardest chapter. But if you can stick it out for this first page here, you're probably doing okay. So let's be back at 7:15. Okay. Chapter 3, ethics. This is about 15 to 20% of the CPA exam. This is huge. And okay. There's an action shot. So this is a huge part of the CPA exam. And the reason is kind of obvious, because all we give to the only thing that we add to the process, to the financial statements, is credibility. You know, we have to be credible, you know, that people can rely on what we're telling them. And to do that, first of all, we can't be an advocate for the client. We can't be, you know, saying, hey, these are great people, you should invest in them. You can't do that. But you also can't be an investor. If I'm invested in this client, I put the stamp of approval on, well, that's, you know, obviously I'm just trying to get someone else to, you know, people to invest in whatever, or banks to loan us money or whatever. So independence is a really big thing. And we have very strict rules, and US standards are very strict as far as the rules for being independent. But they're there for a reason. It's because the only thing we give to the process is credibility. It's the only thing we give to the financial statements. That's it. And if that's not given, then the whole audit doesn't matter what you do with the audit. It can't be believed. So we are very aware of the value that we give to our audit. Okay. Now, the question is, who must be independent? These are people called covered members. And let's make them green. Write it down, CPA exam. Covered members are green. No, okay, so covered members, they are held to a higher standard of independence than other professional staff in the firm. So when you're doing an audit, whatever audit it is, these are people that for that client will be held to a higher standard. And so this is by the client. Okay, so for instance, if we're auditing IBM, I think I use IBM as the standard one in here. You know, so let's say I'm on the IBM audit, I must be independent as it relates to IBM. Right? It can't come out that, oh, well, the auditors were invested in this thing, something like that. So I can't be invested in IBM. Now, can I invest in Ford? If I'm not doing the audit, yeah. If I'm not doing the audit of Ford, I can invest in Ford. But the client that we're looking at, in this case, you know, I think it's IBM as the example. IBM, I cannot be an investor or have any kind of I must be independent, basically. And there's a professional standard there that ensures that we are independent. Okay, so let's see what this is. Who must be independent? All right. Well, the first people that must be independent are the people on the audit engagement team, the auditors. These are the auditors. So the people who are actually auditing the client, they must be independent. And that's everybody. Partners, managers, I don't know, I read these off to you, seniors, and associates. So if we're under partner 3, anyone who's a manager, anyone who's a senior, anyone who's associate with that audit, they must be independent. So no one on the audit can have any financial or employment interest in the audit. Also, anyone who's a partner in that office must be independent. So if you're on the audit itself, you must be independent. If you're a partner in the firm, you must be independent. I should say a partner in that office, in the engagement office. So if the audit's coming out of Chicago, then in the Chicago office, they must be the auditors might on the audit team, whoever's auditing the client will be independent, and all the partners. Okay, and this is probably most of them. Now, there is another group, though. That's people that do consulting. And consulting is things like, it could be consulting for improvements, it could be taxes, it could be, taxes is a big one. It could be other things too, whatever, it could be legal help or whatever it is. But the consulting, in the consulting, in the CPA firm, if the non-attest services, if it's a different office, and the question is, who has to be independent from that? And in this case, it's only the partners and the managers. So if you're a consultant, you're a partner or manager, you must be held to that higher standard of being independent. If you're not, if you're a senior or an associate, and let's say you're doing taxes, for example, you don't have to be, you're not held to the higher standards. You're still held to some standards, but at a much lower rate, we'll talk about later. Not tonight. And those are usually the top three that we're going to have. Let me go over something really quickly because they will, and by the way, these are one of those things that will be tested on the CPA exam. I'll guarantee it. You're going to see questions on this on the CPA. Okay, non-attest services people are covered members only if they perform 10 hours or more of services in the week in a year. Hence, they get the name 10-hour people. Not kidding. Well, 10-hour people. I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult, but 10-hour people. They have to do at least 10 hours of services for the client. If they don't do at least 10 hours of services, they're not a covered member. They're not going to be held to those higher standards. So auditors must be independent. All the partners in that audit firm must be independent in that audit office. Non-attesters, so consulting. Only the partner and manager. The other partners, by the way, don't have to be. If you're this partner and you're in the consulting office, you can own stock in IBM. But people who are in the non-attester, if they're actually doing consulting and they do more than 10 hours a year, then they must be a covered member. And those are probably 99% of the people we're worried about. Okay, now there are other people who are also covered members. Anyone who's in a position to influence the audit. For instance, a senior partner may look over the audit of the junior partner. And because they have that oversight, they must be independent. The CPA firm itself must be independent. So we cannot invest our pension plan in, say, IBM if we're auditing IBM. And any entity that is controlled by covered members. This is, they must be over 50%. This one's kind of a kind of closing a loophole. The last one there, you know, what you don't want to have happen is you have, well, let's say you have three partners in the audit office. Those three partners, they can't own stock in the client because they're covered members. So they go, okay, I know we'll form our own investment company. And you know, all three of us will invest in this, and because there's three of us, no one will have control of it. Well, the standards say that you have to add up all the interest for all the covered members, and if it's more than 50%, then it's also a covered member. So if there's a investment firm that owns stock in IBM and you're auditing IBM, if one of the, you know, if one of the partners owns a third of it, you know, 33% or whatever, that's fine. But if you have over 50% ownership in it, then it's considered a government itself. And it's kind of get around a loophole of people owning stock in their clients. Okay. And we'll go over financial interests. Direct financial interests. Direct financial interests. Prohibited for covered members. So, what's a direct financial interest? Owning stock. Bond. Yeah. Loaning money to the client. Any direct financial interest is not allowed. And by the way, this is any amount. You can't own one share of stock. Okay. So any direct financial interest, let me put that, any direct financial interest. So if you're auditing IBM, you can't have one share of IBM. Okay. Indirect financial interest. Indirect financial interests are allowed. They are immaterial. Oops. So indirect financial interests are allowed if they are immaterial. Examples. Ah. Owning shares in a mutual fund that invests in the client. Owning shares in a bank that loans money to the client. Probably the two most common, but there could be other ones too. So mutual fund, owning shares in a bank that loans money. And so, okay, so here's basically, okay, so direct interest, owning any ownership of the company, loaning them money, buying your stocks or bonds, anything like that, prohibited. Cannot directly interact, with the company financially, with your client. Now, indirect, a mutual fund. Notice that you buy shares in a mutual fund, the mutual fund takes that money and buys shares in stocks, and one of them might be your client. Right, so you give them money, they go and invest the money in those. So there's a separation there. As long as it's not a material amount of the investment firm, the fund, I should say, then usually okay. Or, I'm running IBM, and I invest in Citibank. Citibank owns money to IBM. That's indirect, right? I own stock in Citibank. Citibank then loans some money to IBM. As long as it's immaterial, and with the bank it probably is, that's fine. So indirect means that there's somebody else in the way. There's somebody else actually doing the direct part of it. So we invest in the bank then loans money if it deems the IBM to be a good risk, and it loans them the money. So those are probably the two most common ways that you can have indirect, but they must be immaterial. They can't be material. Okay. Gina is a member of the audit engagement for IBM. She owns 5 shares of IBM stock. The ownership is immaterial to Gina. Okay, is Gina a covered member? Gina a covered member? You guys are sleeping, aren't you? I know exactly what you're doing. Nobody knows if Gina's a covered member. I think you guys are sleeping. All right, yes, she is a covered member. Is this a direct or indirect financial interest?
Direct.
Direct ownership? And is it material or immaterial? They told us it's immaterial, so it's. So again, she's a covered member. How do we know that? We go up here. She's part of the engagement team, so she's a covered member. Oops. Is Gina in violation of the rules? Yes. Direct interests are prohibited. She is in violation of the rules because she cannot own any. She cannot own any direct interest. One share of stock knocks you out. And by the way, if you do work in a CPA firm, here's what usually happens. Let's say you work in a CPA firm, you go to work for the, you go to the Chicago office. What they do is they hand you a list of all their clients in that office. And they say, do you own any of these shares of stock? They have you sign saying that you don't. And if you do own something, they say, okay, sell it, come back and have you sign this. This agreement, because they can't, they don't want to have anyone in the office, even though some of the people aren't covered members in that office. They generally don't want to risk it. So, you know, if IBM is a client, they'll say, yeah, you know, a big list of clients, and they do own any interest in any of these, and if you do, they'll say, okay, you got to sell it, and then you can come in and sign those things saying that you don't own any of the shares of stock, and they don't want to mess with it. If the CPA firm is not independent, it's a big problem. It's a big mess. Okay. Greg. Remember, the audit engagement team. Okay, so right away. We know that Greg is a covered member. The audit engagement team, he's a covered member. He has a Standard & Poor's 500 mutual fund. Because IBM is in the Standard & Poor's 500 mutual fund, the mutual fund has a direct interest in IBM. Okay, so the mutual fund has the interest, not Greg. The mutual fund has the interest in. Now, this is an indirect interest. Greg doesn't actually own IBM stock. He owns shares of this mutual fund. The mutual fund then went and bought IBM because IBM is one of the biggest 500. So this is definitely going to be an indirect interest. Okay, now Standard & Poor's 500. That means there's 500 companies in that fund. So IBM is one of 500 companies. Is that going to be a material amount of that fund? What do you think? If you took IBM out of that fund, would anyone notice? Probably not. I mean, IBM would probably get mad about it, but yeah, so it's one of the 500 companies. So, you know, what one company does probably doesn't move that fund very much at all. there's 499 other companies, if IBM has a bad day, there's 499 other companies. It probably doesn't matter too much. Or if they have a good day, it probably doesn't matter too much. Spread out. So it definitely is immaterial. And this would be fine. And this is a very common thing you'll have is, you have a retirement account and you put it in a Standard Poor's 500 fund. Is Greg in violation of the rules? No. It's immaterial and it's indirect. Okay, Helen is not a member of the audit engagement for IBM. However, she is a senior auditor in the engagement office. She owns 500 shares of IBM stock, and this investment is material to Helen. Is she in violation of the rules? Okay. Is Helen a covered member? We know that she's not on the audit engagement team. Is she a covered member? She's a senior auditor in the engagement office.
No.
Good. No, she's not. Maybe this is Helen. She's not a covered member. So because she's not a covered member, okay, this is a direct interest and it's material. Is she in violation of the rules?
Yes.
Actually, no. She is not a covered member. She does not have those same rules. She can have a direct financial interest in the client. And the idea being is that she can't influence the audit. She has
Sorry.
no, yeah.
Sorry, is it all right if you just go back really quick to indirect financial interest B? I just want to finish copying it.
Oh, this one? Yeah. Yeah, so the indirect financial interest, it's okay as long as it is immaterial. And immaterial is by the fund itself, it's immaterial. So, if it's 1 in 500 companies, that's probably immaterial. If there's a fund for tech companies, say that it has a large portion of it is IBM, then maybe it might be material. But Standard Poor's 500 fund, you're or even a 100 fund, you're generally fine because there's one stock isn't going to do too much, and that's the whole purpose of it is to spread it out. Yeah, okay, so if they're not a covered member, they are not held to those same standards. So Helen is fine. She's not a covered member. Now Helen cannot ever be switched over here to this engagement team. And quite honestly, in this office, they probably have everybody, make sure everybody doesn't have that stock. But if they don't, she's not a covered member. I'm gonna stop here. Because this starts to get kind of nitpicky down here. So let's go ahead and stop. Coming up, we have the problem of what do you do with family members or friends and relatives and all that kind of stuff. So let's stop here. Okay, so the only so we're not going to so the improving memory handout, you can turn that in. There's only a few multiple choice questions for that. But, so yeah, so that one, so improving memory, you can turn that in, and hopefully, you know, you kind of, as you're going through this, sometimes people ask me about taking the CPAs and, you know, start getting in the habit of doing those things, writing things out, using colors, talking about, you know, saying things out loud, reading your notes out loud. I know it sounds crazy, but walking around reading your notes out loud really helps. And if you read it a few times, then try to say it without reading it, and that's even better. And have more synapses really get made. So just get used to this idea of the more synapses, the more synapses, the more synapses, the more you remember. And again, it isn't a quality. It isn't, you know, oh, it has to be specifically about this. It could, you know, sing a song about covered members or something. And by the way, if you're wondering where they got the term covered members, it's members that are covered by the rules that they have. So, all right, so you can turn that one in, and then hold on to these other two next week. I'm not sure if we'll get both of those done. Probably not. But I do want to, and actually, chapter 3 will probably won't get done next week. There's a lot there, and again, it's 15 to 20% of the CPA exam. So if we spend a little more time on it, we're not actually wasting time. That's probably very important time, because no other chapter in this whole book has 15 to 20% for the CPA exam. Okay, any questions? Okay, I'll see you guys next week.
All right, sorry. I was trying to find the mic. So we just have to turn in the sampling assignment.
No, you turn that in yet. Take it rid of that one. So what you're gonna turn in is, what am I doing here? I'm sorry. This is the only thing you're gonna turn in. The improving memory handout has multiple choice questions at the end. That's the only thing. This thing. Let me put that up. Okay, here. And again, if you're planning on taking the CPA exam, this is the stuff that's important. And I'll tell you something else. I actually took if you look at my credentials, I got a CFM, Chartered Financial Manager, or Certified Financial Manager. I don't know what it is. But anyway, I took that exam, and it was kind of like practice what you preach. I decided I was going to go through all these things, and it was actually pretty good. It breezed right through it. And that's given out, but that was given out by the Institute of Managerial Accountants. Are the ones that do the CMA exam. And I tell you what, I did that one. I did that one to get out of doing the CPE, the continuing education work. Continuing professional education. You have to take a certain number of hours and all that, which is got awful boring. So I said, okay, what if I just get like every year I'll get a designation for something, and then that will take care of it, because they count that as like 40 hours or whatever. So anyway, I did all this stuff, and it really it actually very I don't want to say easy, but it was very effective at doing it. So. But anyway, yeah. So that's the only thing you're turning in though, is that improving memory. Hold on to the financial sampling, classical sampling, and hold on to chapter 3. Next week we should probably finish up the classical sampling. We usually do a couple more, and then there's a couple more on there to do on your own, and you turn that in next week. The chapter 3, I don't know, we may not finish that. We'll see. And then, you know, I know that it's kind of a hard one to go through, because it's this but not this, and all that kind of stuff. But it's a big part of the exam, so it's kind of a pain. It's also kind of worth it to take the time on it. Any questions? All right, I will see you guys next week, and it looks like this is recorded, so you can also look at the recording of it. I will see you next week. I guess.